Hi, welcome to the Diablo Podcast. We are online at DiabloIncGamers.com, and we used to be online at DiabloPodcast.com, but that just redirects you now, so I shouldn't give that a 0. Best intro ever. I am talking to Exile tonight.
Howdy.
And Exile has been playing lots and lots of Diablo 3 lately and practicing and getting ready for the expansion stuff, right?
If by Diablo you mean lots of pandas, then yes.
But you have exceeding interest in the expansion stuff. We're talking all about expansion pack ideas tonight and new things in the game and things that can be fixed and improved.
Yes, like what we were saying earlier, the possibility of what could be is always almost more exciting than what is.
Yeah, I was mentioning that to you before we started recording here, is that it's funny that you and Wolfpack and other people were on many shows before the beta and during the beta, talking about what's going to be in the game and all this stuff, and then once the game came out, it's like, it's more fun to speculate than it is to actually do it.
Yeah.
And obviously Diablo 3 was not a perfect product upon launch, although it's gotten much better, not that you would know, but it just seems like it's more fun to talk about what's coming, and of course, expansion, and immediately you and Wolfpack were like, hey, we're up for that show, let's talk about the expansion.
Yeah. I feel like from one of the previous podcasts you had me on, I think this is a really big chance for Blizzard to kind of set the record straight, I feel, even if changes have been made between now or between when the game was released and when the expansion comes out. A lot of people are not going to come back until there is, some sort of expansion, I guess.
PvP? Oh, wait, that's not good enough.
And, when is that coming? I mean, the year's almost over.
Well, as we're calling him, Jay the Disaster Wilson said it would be bad if it didn't happen, so...
Yeah,
they've got, 6 weeks, 5 weeks left.
Yeah. Well, I hope they're working around the clock here, because they've been relatively silent, right?
Yeah, they've said nothing for a while. Obviously, you're up for improvement since you're not playing the game currently, and then again, you don't know how much better it's gotten. So I'm kind of running down some of the topics I put in that big article that I wrote that it got lots of disparate comments on.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things people said were better single-player features. That was one of the things that I saw some comments on. I don't even really know what you would have for better single-player features, like ladders or tournaments or something, or level-up challenges, or
kill count, or I don't know. I mean, you guys already have a kill count on the site, right?
Yeah, it's that you have to register for that and stuff. So. And we all wanted statistics in the game. That was one of the pre-game things, and they said, yeah, sure, we'll have that, and of course we don't have that.
Yeah. I was always relatively lonely when I was playing by myself, and
in the ghost town of Battle.net.
Yeah, I was like, man, I need companionship, But then I would go into the public games and everyone was pretty silent. Actually, when I was really doing a lot of public games is when I was doing Inferno, and it was a lot of people yelling at each other, like, well, you're not geared right, and you're not spec'd right, and you get this revolving door of new people because people get frustrated at the super elite mega mob, and then you'd get a new person, and like, all right, well, line on up and to get murdered.
Of course, that was in May, so it's when it actually was hard in Inferno. Now it's just sort of now Inferno's weird because you can't do monster power in it,
right?
So it's really easy on Monster Power 0 in a multiplayer game.
Yeah. So man, see that almost seems like it's not fun enough. But then you can reset the monster power by yourself, right?
Yeah, it only works in private games by yourself or with friends.
Okay.
But it's just, Monster Power 0 is easy, and they've done all these changes since launch to make, monsters get fewer hit points in games now. They get 75% for more each additional player. Whereas initially it was like they actually got more hit points than usual. Now they actually get less than usual. So it gets easier the more people are there. And people still don't play in multi. So that's really the thing that people are complaining about is the Battle.net ghost town, and we need more people. And they have these features in Diablo 3 that, they took out the ninja looting, and they took out non-consensual PvP. PKing was removed.
Yeah.
And they seem like they thought that, okay, this will be all we need, and people will line up to play multiplayer. And people don't play multiplayer because you don't get experience bonuses, you don't get item bonuses as you did in Diablo 2. So when you were playing in your days of multiplayer and people were arguing and yelling at each other, can you think of features that could have helped that? What do you want? What do you want added to multiplayer that'll make you want to jump into public games?
I guess if there's more of an incentive to play with other people, I'm not really sure.
And what would that incentive be?
Sweeter loots might be nice. Maybe more experience, like Paragon supercharging, like multipliers. almost like you could play by yourself, but be faster to play with others. I mean, given there already are other people helping you mow down things, but and maybe if your experience bar moves a little bit faster.
So basically Diablo 2 then.
Basically, yeah, wherein you have maybe a bail run.
It's funny how every change they made in Diablo 3, it's like they, well, not every change, but quite a few of them is, sort of gradually going back to what Diablo 2 had. That reinventing of the wheel ARPG thing.
Yeah, that will eventually be my thesis much later in the podcast.
So how about like special quest events or raid content? Obviously World of Warcraft is all about the raid content.
Yeah.
And they've always said they don't want anything in Diablo 3 you can't complete by yourself, but I mean, why not? Why not have some online, obviously the whole game is online only, so that's not a problem, but some new dungeons, some big things you really can't do by yourself, either because you literally can't do it, it's limited to 4-player games or something, or else it's just really, really hard.
Right.
I mean, why not? There's plenty of game you can do, as long as there's not some special reward from that you can't get anywhere else.
Right. I actually like thinking about it now. Like a raid wouldn't. I personally don't think that would be bad. I would love to see more people on the screen, honestly. And as long as it isn't like a raid boss that's one-shot murdering everybody, something that everyone can. If there's like a big boss that everyone can whittle away, I think that'd be kind of fun. Or some sort of. It's almost like you need a whole new type of game. Like there's the story, but the story is so linear. You kind of need like a theme park. If Blizzard is talking about getting people re-energized about the game and replayability, which after looking on the forums at Ink Gamers, I feel like a lot of people are like, well, it's a linear game. You play it and you're done. But then others are like, yeah, but I want a reason to keep going. So there's kind of that rift right now. I personally felt like Diablo 2 had very little endgame. It didn't stop making the character progression fun, and it didn't keep from making the item hunt fun. I still enjoy that a lot, but I kind of knew, like, with that game, I would go on like 1 month stints and then like burn out. I'd go hardcore for a month and then just give up for a month and then come back, and unfortunately, all my characters would be deleted, and I'd have to start over.
And you did that for 8 years.
Yeah, and then I go, damn it! I worked so hard on these characters. It's just to have them just not be there anymore. So maybe that's part of the nostalgia, is the fact that we'd always have to constantly restart our characters.
Yeah, or you'd want to re-roll because there were new builds and new patch changes and stuff.
That's true. Yeah,
that's the whole other issue with D3, where there's never really a reason to re-roll unless you just want to.
Yeah.
And I as I mentioned in that article, and I've done all along, I continue to advocate for some kind of character customization. Like maybe you can manually assign some of your stat points after level 60, or there's some kind of a skill point system added, or something.
I would definitely agree with that. I don't know how they could build it with this system right now, but if there's a way obviously there's a whole bunch of features that we remember from them saying at BlizzCon that are not there anymore. All of those things, it was kind of like, well, we're not going to have you customize your stats because you're going to have all these trinkets that you can add and, charms and your gear and, this and that.
Enchants and everything else. Yeah.
Right. And I feel like, yeah, if they bring in all of those things, then I won't be so irritated anymore, because it's just like right now all that really matters is just having a weapon. It's just like it really felt like one number that was really important. That was how much DPS I was swinging. It wasn't how much life I had, or there wasn't any weapon that like made my skill better. And do they even have those at this point? I never came across that.
No, but that's a topic I have for later in this podcast.
Oh, sorry.
So we'll get to there. And I do kind of, just want to mention it now, is that I think they're, like the really interesting, they've added a few of those in the Legendaries improvements, where they do a few different things.
Yeah.
Like there's ones that summon an angel that runs around and hits stuff for you, and like it's attached to you with a big glowing fire chain kind of stuff. That's a demon actually, but same kind of thing. But very little. I think that one of the cool things in other games, like Torchlight 2 has this, where you find lots of legendaries, but then there's like super legendaries that are like a level above, and they're ultra rare, and they do like amazing, awesome things.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like, my theory was like, or just harkening back to Diablo 2, they're like Enigma, or the other ones are like, the one helm that would transform you and give you like the whirlwind power with any character, that kind of stuff. So it's not, it's not just a weapon that has, double the DPS or something. I mean, it actually, in theory, they're kind of equivalent to current really good weapons, but they do something different. They give you a different spell or a different skill or change the game up in some way.
Yeah.
Would be really cool to find, and I think they should be, I don't know, BOA or BOE or something like that. So, they just don't get traded around endlessly, but it's like you find this and it's really special, or you buy it in the auction house and it's really special.
Mm.
And then it gives you something different and changes up the gameplay in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. If there was more to work on other than just the character, obviously I could take this into, knowing me, where I would love to see Diablo 3 go, which is, the whole guild system, maybe, something, anything, a reason for people to get together and do something together and work on something.
So how would a guild differ or add on to the regular multiplayer? I mean, you're sharing gold or something, or what?
It still hurts all these years later when they had, I remember it was like April or May, and Blizzard released the shot of the barbarian in his guild hall. And like the more guild you throw into this like pyre in the center of your guild hall, the more you could add on to it, make it cool. And I always thought that was pretty awesome. If there was, you had a guild and it was all about putting together this totally sweet guild hall, that would be super sweet.
So there'd be a space in game, and you could have multiple people kind of milling around like like the bar at Tristram, except they're not all just zombies.
Yeah.
You can actually have other people there and talking and somehow seeing your avatar in the space. Obviously like World of Warcraft gets that kind of thing, or every MMO. And we kind of had that in D2 with the chat channels, but not really. But at least you saw your avatar on the screen.
Right.
And then in StarCraft in D3, there's the common ghost town effect in BattleNet, and you just have names on a screen, and somehow nobody chats anymore.
Right. And I was trying to figure out recently in my Panda experiences, why do I keep coming back to this game? Like, why do I like World of Warcraft? And it's like I'll cruise around with, I'll kill some enemies and they'll drop a mace, and I'll have this really sweet mace, and then I'll go into town, and then there's a guy with an even bigger mace, and that mace is on fire, and that thing looks so cool, and then I go research on how to get it, and it suddenly becomes like the focus, my total drive. How do I make my character look as cool as your character? And it's like, yeah, if there was...
You go in the auction house and buy it.
Yeah. If there was...
Oh, you mean you have to actually find items in World of Warcraft? You don't just go and buy them in an auction house?
I'm sure you can buy them, but it's usually all Chinese people, and it's with stolen accounts.
I thought all the best stuff was BOA or BOE or something anyway.
Yeah, and they have bind on pickup, stuff like that.
Bop.
Yeah, they do actually make it... I mean, you could... in essence, get the best stuff in the game, but it's going to take you like a couple months to get it. They definitely perfected that carrot on a rope kind of mentality with that game, and that's something. I mean, like the items, yeah, I really feel like Jay Wilson and all of them were right. Like Diablo 3 is about the items, but they really, and then that's another thing, they should really like clean up the whole item system. It seems like they're really making awesome strides in that part. And I think that's to probably kind of massage that out a little bit would be to their benefit. And then when the expansion comes out, what was old news for current players would be, awesome new features for people who had, given up on Diablo altogether.
Like yourself.
Like myself.
Okay, another topic, level layout, level design. One of the... we thought that it'd be pretty cool. There was all this debate when we discovered that the outdoor levels weren't going to be totally random, or, at least semi-random, like they are in Diablo 2.
Yeah.
And, we were like, okay, Blizzard's excuse was that you can see, they can do better art and stuff, and better layouts, and they have random elements in the middle of the levels, dungeon entrances and such. And actually... I kind of thought that would be lame. I was looking more for randomization, but I think that I like the system the way it is, more or less, where if you want to just run through to the end, you know where to go. And if you want to explore, you can explore. and you never know what's going to be inside the levels. They're much more random in that way. Whereas Diablo 2, the shape was random, but all the elements inside them were the same crap every time.
Yeah. I think they did a pretty good job with Diablo 3's system. I did like how, it was kind of a bummer once in a while because, people would just rush right towards the end if you were in like a public game and it wasn't, a bunch of your friends trying to like scrape up some decent loot. I don't know, I'm kind of torn on that actually, when I think about it. Because there was something nice about, playing through that whole level in Diablo 2, and then you eventually get to the exit, but then there's that horrible scenario where you have 4 directions to go, and the last direction you finally land on happens to be where the exit is, and you're completely just sick of the level and you're ready to move on.
Well, it's kind of a weird thing with D3 because now people just sort of explore the whole levels because all you're doing is trying to find the bosses and kill them to get the items. So there's really not a reason, you don't do runs really. You're not trying to get through just to get down to Asmodan or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like that was the whole point in Diablo 2, just trying to get down to Mephisto, or Baal or whatever.
Yeah.
So that kind of changed the whole system. But the irony is that people more complain in D3 about the dungeons, as opposed to the surface areas. Where like the catacombs in Act 1, it's just sort of these huge blocks, and like there's the puzzle pieces of the randomization of the layout are too large, and so it just sort of feels really familiar. Oh, great, here's that big stretch with the library and the 2 tables are over here on the right again, etc. And it seems like there's a lot of like D2, the dungeons seem to be made of smaller pieces, and you could explore endlessly, and of course you'd get lost and cursed because you couldn't find where the damn exit was when you're trying to get out of Durance of Hate level 2 or something like that. But it just seems like people are wondering how they might design the level layouts in the hypothetical Act 5, adding in the expansion. Do you want more levels? Do you want bigger dungeons? Do you want more levels in the dungeons? What is your wish list for dungeon layouts?
For dungeons, I definitely would like, you know what, I think you're right, smaller set pieces would have been nice. Because, once you see certain landmarks, you sort of recognize exactly how far away you are. And I only say that because it sort of took the fun out of the exploration part out of going through and really truly dungeon crawling. If you know the layout every time, it's great in the beginning, but then I think it definitely doesn't help the replayability. That was what was one of the amazing, mind-blowing things of Diablo 1. Was that every time you start a new game, it's completely different.
Yeah, the layout at least.
Yeah. And then the order of some of the quests were kind of different, but it's still relatively familiar. The catacombs and the areas were always themed the same every 4 stages, but. Yeah, that was. I remember just explaining that to one of my friends and just having his mind blown. Wait, so every time I play, it's completely different. It's like, yeah, pretty much.
How about guest monsters kind of thing that we got eventually in D2X, where you could get like any kind of monster anywhere in the game on the highest difficulty levels? And D3's got pretty good monster variety, but they're all themed. It's logically organized. You're going to get undead and skeleton summoners and stuff in Area X, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Would you want more variety and randomization on that?
I don't know if a whirling dervish would fit in the catacombs. I wouldn't mind.
Well, the doorways are kind of narrow. Oh, do you mean thematically?
Yeah. They could do it if they could go for it. They could have an option to just totally.
Okay, maybe you can not have whirling dervishes, but you could have fallen appear there instead.
Okay.
Where you don't get them now or something.
Yeah.
Maybe on only on Inferno difficulty. That was the whole thing in D2X. It was guest monsters were in Hell difficulty only, and in Act 5 eventually they put them everywhere. So you never knew what you were going to get, and it might be really really easy, or it might be a total pain in the ass depending on what monsters showed up.
Right. They could throw those guys in there. Why not? I feel like when you got to Hell mode in Diablo 2, it was just like they kept just making these weird hodgepodge environments and weird little kind of quest systems, and I wouldn't mind like a total crazy mode. You have dervishes being resurrected by fallen shaman and all that crazy stuff. There could be some fun stuff there.
One of the things that I've been noticing and wondering about is there's a kind of a sameness to a lot of the areas in Diablo 3 in terms of the monsters you fight. And a lot of that is because they no longer have that much variety between themselves, especially in terms of resistances. So like you get parts of D2 where if you got all skeleton, all burning dead or something, you're like crap. I can't use there's no leech here, and they're all immune to fire. So that totally rules out like two major game styles.
Yeah.
Whereas nothing in Diablo 3 is immune to anything, and all kinds of damage are the same except for different colors, and nothing's immune to physical. So it kind of in the making things easier, dumbing down / accessibility, the whole debate there we've had in the past. It doesn't feel like okay, this level has fallen, and this level has cultists, but there's still tiny stuff that runs at me fast. There's still big bashing ones that are slower, and there's still mages, and they're just different colors. And I can use the same spells to kill every single one of them, and the same kind of debuffs and the same kind of CC stuff. It seems. I mean, I don't know if they're going to change that because that seems like kind of their whole game mode now, but. You can just kind of change the colors and the name tags on the monsters, and everything kind of plays the same no matter where you go.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't see them like making things immune to like fire or immune to physical or anything like that. It just kind of, as much as I appreciated that at times, especially when you're in a group of like 8 people. In Diablo 2, it definitely, like when I was running a sorceress, it was like, okay, well I have a ice sorceress, and this thing's immune to ice, so I'm completely worthless, so I have to run away,
But that made it interesting where a fire sorceress could just kick ass in that part. I mean,
true.
That's one of the problems. Like we were saying earlier, the character, you don't feel that much individuality of characters, and you don't need to re-roll or to make new characters because every character works pretty well in every single area.
Actually, given the whole free spec system, it might be interesting for something like a wizard. And I know that going full ice in this area wouldn't work out. Like it's kind of an interesting thought there, where you could ask people to, or challenge people to kind of like diversify their skill set for particular areas. That could be something fun.
Well, we were kind of thinking that would be the case with all these runes and skill runes. There's so many different, you can turn your Hydra into poison or lightning or, arcane or whatever. And we all thought, okay, that'll be awesome because we can, you'll want to have, a different kind of, you'll want to have fire damage and cold damage and poison damage all at once. You can alternate between them whichever you need, like you do in Diablo 2. But you never need that in Diablo 3 because nothing's ever immune or resistant to anything in particular. So the only difference between arcane and whatever is the firing speed and if it leaves a puddle on the ground or whatever.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter what the damage. Every damage in the game could just be orange or something. It would make no difference in the playability. They're just different colors because different colors are cool.
Different colors are pretty cool. Yeah. That is one thing about Diablo 3. It's sort of like, do you want to hit rapidly or do you want to hit singularly with a lot of damage? Huh. I don't really know how to respond to that. Just kind of like, huh.
Well, it's food for thought.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'm just kind of curious what Blizzard's going to do, because it's like, I feel like one more game-breaking mechanic, could it hurt? Give it a try?
I mean, it's kind of the same thing we were saying. We want more item modes and other stuff. I mean, item mods, not item modes. Although I guess modes would help as well. But
yeah.
Like they simplified so much of the item system. I mean, really all you want on items is DPS and critical hit chance and like attack speed. And maybe you need some life leech and there's some other things that are useful, your main stat, your vitality, etc. But it just seems, and you can get every stat you want on like 8 different kinds of item slots, and it's just a matter of kind of adding up incrementally more. Ooh, I have 17 more dexterity on these gloves,
Yeah.
Whereas the whole thing in D2 was that, you had to have, like, critical, crushing blow. It was only on, like, 3 items in the whole game. So everybody wanted to have, goblin toe boots or whatever.
Yeah.
And it just seems like there was so much more variety and interest in, you have to get this helm to get this kind of stat, this particular item in the game, or there's only a few of these items that have this. Or I really need to get a big amount of, like, I want to up my potential fire resistance, so I have to get this paladin shield, and nothing else will do it. And there's just not that level of specialization in D2. It's just such a simple, you want Resol on main stat and vitality. It's pretty much all you're looking for.
Yeah.
And it seems like we just would like, And a lot of that came in the expansion of Diablo 2, where original D2 was much more simplified, and then they added tons of stuff. And since we're talking about the expansion here, in theory, maybe they can start adding in more variety, more diversity, and not just have the same basic stats and attributes on items. And are you ready for more variety, more complexity in the expansion?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And I hope that, if they, well, at this point we can only assume that they would have enchanting, from the mystic, and then they would have the charms. Like that could really, really help the playability of the game.
Assuming that those enchants aren't just plus 12 dexterity,
Right.
Otherwise, it's just more of the same that we have now, and who cares?
Yeah, I mean, if it could add, I don't know. Maybe if there's a way to add, potency to your spells. I mean, I think, the resistance of monsters could be something they could look into. I mean, I think if they could strike a good balance, then I would be all for playing those modes, or just like some sort of revamped version of Inferno.
So they had a lot of features, and they streamlined a lot of things. Obviously, you mentioned some of them. The Mystic went out, and the Talisman and Charms, etc.
Yeah.
And a lot of they would say things like, well, Bashiok would make some posts. My mom was playing, and she didn't understand how this mechanic works, so we got rid of it. I mean, not literally, but that was they would make these analogies to accessibility.
Yeah.
And obviously, you've been playing World of Warcraft for 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's lots more classes and professions and all kinds of stuff that's complicated in that game. How do they ease you into the learning curve on that to eventually get into hard stuff? And why don't we get more of that in Diablo 3?
Well, actually,
if you were a brand new person picking up World of Warcraft today, God help you, would you be just bewildered and overwhelmed by the number of options and possibilities? And is it only because you've been playing it through 9 expansions that it all makes sense?
Well, that's actually a really good question. Going back and playing a new character now is just totally different than when I first started, because back in vanilla World of Warcraft, they went with the assumption that you knew what you were doing because you had played EverQuest and Dark Age. And I really feel like it's almost like the World of Warcraft guys came over to the Diablo guys, like when they were having lunch, and said, "Nah, you don't want to do it like this. You want to do it like that. And we've made millions of dollars, and we know what we're talking about." And Jay Wilson scratches his head and goes, "Well, gee, guys, I want to make millions, and I want to, not be ridiculed," which, in hindsight,
How'd that work out for you, Jay?
seems really nice. But anyway, you've probably heard this before. Basically, the World of Warcraft adventure from 1 to 90 is really learning how to play your class, which sounds familiar because they really wanted the normal mode of Diablo 3 to be like learning how to play your class. The problem with Diablo 3 is that I don't really feel like they take you off the rails at any point. You learn how to play your class, and then you continue to just sort of play your class, whereas in Warcraft, it's sort of like go nuts. I mean, they've definitely done more to keep you in a particular frame set. So when you create a priest, you can either be holy, disciple, or shadow. Whereas at one point I had this like really fun hybrid that was kind of disciple and kind of holy, but they put a stop to all that in with the most recent talent system. But I mean, even still, they have...
That was a big simplification, right? They kind of did like the Diablo 3 skill system?
Kind of, yeah.
Where there used to be like 100 professions, and now there's like 10 or something?
They've definitely slimmed it down a lot, and they've taken things like the Paladin. There was a long-range spellcasting DPS Paladin called a Shakadin, and that they kind of killed that, and they sort of pissed off a lot of people, but it didn't really fit into what a class... And basically every class can be one of 3 types. It just really depends on how you want to deal damage or how you want to heal, and you sort of build around that. And but they don't really let you... They ease you into it, and then once you hit max level, it's kind of like, all right, go raid, go PvP, go figure out what stat it is that you need. It doesn't really... It hints at what you need, but it's sort of requires you to go out of the game and go read up and meticulously plan out like, oh, okay, well, I need a lot more intellect and I need a lot more haste. I need to be able to cast faster and all that stuff. So I feel like it's sort of like there's that level of depth that I feel like Diablo 3 doesn't have, but it's not to say that Diablo 2 didn't have that. You're meticulously, World of Warcraft based their talent system off of Diablo 2's talent system, which I think is really telling because it was like this, oh, well, if I put points into this, it unlocks this, and I need 5 points in this to get to, the level 10 tier of this. Stuff like that, I think, is what really gets people invested. And I think that was one of the problems with Diablo 3 is it's just sort of like, it's almost like they needed some sort of talent system. People probably totally disagree with that, and I'm just one person. But yeah, that feeling of just like extreme customization and, patting myself on the back for doing the research and, just noticing a total change in my character because I started pumping this stat. And sorry, I know I'm on like total ramble here, but that's another thing about Diablo 3 or World of Warcraft that gets you into it is that you get these gloves and then you can go reforge the stats in town. You can completely just scramble the stats to make them the way you want them, and then you can enchant them, and then some particular items, have additional things you can have. If you're a blacksmith and you have a belt, you can add a belt buckle that holds a gem. That's right, gemming. There's just so once you get gloves, it's not just a pair of gloves. It's this thing that can be completely it just added on to and reworked.
Well, they had scrolls of reforging in the beta, so in Diablo 3.
Yeah.
And it would re-roll the stats on an item, and people, I assume that's kind of what they'll add, in the expansion. The Mystic or somebody will be like, hey, you can re-roll the stats on this, or, everyone has found, you found this awesome rare axe, and it's got, plus 200 intelligence, and you're like, if that was one other stat, it would be such an awesome item.
Yeah.
And they got, you can't just make it an easy enough system that you just change the intelligence to strength or something, because then it's just too easy. But
yeah,
some way to try to re-roll existing items or to add modifiers. I'm sure we'll get an NPC that adds sockets to things.
Yeah.
They had the jeweler doing that all through the beta and the pre-game, and they decided to make sockets rarer to save it for the expansion, I would assume.
Yeah.
The bastards.
Yeah. So it's like they had all these. I feel like when I was at BlizzCon, I was just foaming at the mouth because they had all these things in place.
It's a common problem at BlizzCon,
yes,
actually.
I totally just fell for it. They just we're taking away stat customization, but look at all these different things that you're going to be able to do, and then they pulled it. That would have added so much more depth to my character.
Well, Jay Wilson's daughter didn't like that, and she's 7, so if she can't do it, it can't be in the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Gratuitous Jay Wilson comments aside. So, speaking of character stuff, and you mentioning obviously a lot of it goes with items and such. That was a common thing in Diablo 2. You wanted to make, you look at the character builds and say, hey, I want to make a really cool Javazon. What do I need? You need, Titan's Revenge, and you need to get, at least plus 10 to this skill tree, etc. And it wasn't super complicated, but there were specific goals you could go for.
Yeah.
Whereas in D3, it's like, okay, I just want more dexterity. How much? Well, every point more adds damage, so I just want more.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of builds now that are fairly specific in their requirements, but really all they need is a certain amount of life on hit and a critical hit chance. And once you get to 35 or 40% critical hit chance, you can probably do it. And you need enough procs to be happening that you can keep triggering your heal, etc.
Yeah.
And the most overpowered, ridiculous build in the game is this whole barbarian build where you have sprint, run like the wind, and you use whirlwind also as well, and you use one of your war cries to make you add fury when you get critical hits. So you're just spewing out tornadoes constantly, and they're killing everything behind you. And everyone uses this, and that's why we have these level 100 Paragon barbarians already.
Mm.
And it's really, really easy, and I finally geared up my barb a little bit to try it just a couple days ago. I found a Messerschmitt's Reaver fairly recently, which, the old Diablo 2 unique axe.
Yeah.
And it does huge damage, and it had a socket, so mine has 190% critical hit damage. And the damage is gigantic, and it's totally awesome, and I was running around through Act 1 Inferno with this, just killing stuff in 1 second. I'm like, this is the most ridiculously overpowered build possible. I run past skeletons, and they all die, 10 yards behind me. And then I got to Act 2 and tried to use it some in the Oasis and started getting those invisible packs of the spear-stabbing snake men.
Yeah.
And got slaughtered. Because I had the damage with the setup really nicely, but I didn't have the life on hit. And therefore I was just helpless, because as soon as anything could actually hit me back. It was great with zombies.
Yeah.
They're just standing there watching you run past.
Yeah.
And then I got things that could actually hit me, and I was doomed. So obviously I don't have the gear for it in terms of I don't have the life on hit, which, I could get in the auction house for several million gold. But I mean, there are equipment requirements to make some of the really cool builds work, obviously. And there's a wizard build that's very similar in that kind of way with faster casting stuff. You need the critical hits so you can keep spamming your cooldowns getting turned off.
Okay, yeah.
But it's just much less involved and complicated than most ARPGs, and certainly than Diablo II and the World of Warcraft was. So
yeah.
Yes, I didn't really get into major class changes in that thing I wrote about.
Yeah.
Current skill changes, because that's such a big issue. But it's hard to say is if someone doesn't like a demon hunter, why not? Well, I wish they could tank better. Well, that wouldn't really be a demon hunter because they're supposed to be a fast hitting archer kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
so
there's kind of a fine line between do I make this change and is it just that's just not a character for you?
Yeah, I mean stylistically, I really think they nailed that, hands down. I mean, obviously there are some lacking roles that people have in their minds that would be nice, but other than that, I mean, everyone looks awesome. The Demon Hunter, I still think is just the most beautifully concepted character in the game.
And the last one they put in, oddly enough.
Yeah.
Save the best. So speaking of 6th or 7th character, what are you looking for?
Well,
the general assumption is we have, people say Necromancer often. They want that back.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that. But, people point out, obviously, that there's only one character that has strength as a main stat, is the Barbarian.
Yeah. And
there's 2 Dex and 2 Intelligence. Everybody assumes they've got to have a Druid or something like that, or a sword shield kind of guy for the 6th character, so there'll be someone else using strength.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe not. Maybe they'll do a hybrid character that uses 2 stats, or maybe they'll change the whole item system and attribute system around. So, I mean, I think it's pretty much wide open. But
yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, for the for the fanboys, I would definitely say the obvious Paladin Necro combo. I think we all secretly want that. I'll just be open.
I don't want that secretly or otherwise. Go ahead.
Well, I know that if you put it to a vote, if you wanted a new class, definitely the Necro. I really I loved the Witch Doctor because he was just like this big old bag of tricks with some kind of weak minions. I would just love to have my Zookeeper from Diablo 2 again. That was it was unfair and hilarious. And, then having my buddy who was a Paladin, put an aura on every one of my skeletons and and also, in that first, when Cormac is having his conversation with Jondar, the Necro, I was like, oh man, I really miss the Necro. I would love to see him again. And on that note, I feel like a message to the Diablo 3 team, if they want to get people to play again, then they're really going to need to bank on the whole nostalgia factor of Diablo 2. Yeah, it could be, a Paladin by any other name, I suppose.
So the problem with a Necromancer is a lot of it would seem to overlap with the Witch Doctor,
right.
With minions and with sort of mind control stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then of course there are no longer corpses in Diablo 3. That the bodies evaporate away.
Yeah.
So how do you raise corpses and blow up corpses? And I guess curses are much more. That's one of the whole problems that I've argued about in Diablo 3 is there's very few shared skills. Very few of your skills matter to anybody else.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously there's less in terms of auras and battle cries and such, but also things like curses for the Necromancer, where you could do stuff that made everybody else absolutely love you, lower resistance or something like that.
Yeah. Bone magic was always really cool. I really liked that. That was always fun for me, getting on the Necro. Yeah, poisoning things, although that is kind of a Witch Doctor voodoo thing. He sort of takes care of that. Yeah, there is a little bit of overlap there, huh? I guess something between the Wizard and the Witch Doctor. But then again, I think people want to have a sword and shield character.
Well, you can play, there were shield skills with the Barbarian during development. Those all kind of went away.
Right.
at launch, there's really nothing that gives you any bonus to using any particular kind of weapons at all, which is another problem with the game. But the item system anyway. It's just, you can have a high-level character, and there's no reason to specifically use any kind of item. Wizards can be using two-handed axes or something if they want.
Yeah. And so that kind of throws a wrench in that. The fact that you will have like my wizard had a polearm for a while, which I feel like is very uncanon for what you'd expect. You'd expect them to have like carrying one of those globes and a wand, but whatever has the DPS.
And of course, there's no weapon range anymore of any kind in Diablo 3, and kind of that wouldn't, so, you can use a dagger or a polearm, and it's exactly the same in effect on your character. Obviously, the dagger will be a little faster, and in theory, have a little less damage.
Yeah.
But of course, how do you make weapon, that would never matter to a wizard or a witch doctor, obviously, with casting spells.
Yeah.
And, a great many of the other skills are, effects. The monk is like throwing giant Taco Bells at things and stuff. And, the barbarian's running around casting whirlwinds, so that doesn't have anything with weapon range either. So it's kind of hard to work that back into the game at this point.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of mechanics that are just like, no, it doesn't really work now with the direction that they went. So yeah. Something that seems to take a lot of damage, like a paladin, something that is in plate armor. I mean, this is merely stylistic request at this point. Yeah.
So you want a combination Necromancer paladin who looks cool in armor, but also is gothic and it looks like it's an emo thing.
Combination Pizza Hut and Taco Bell for anyone who gets that comment.
Yes, and horrible heartburn at 3 a.m.
Yeah, I just. I feel like I personally feel like I want to see every kind of role be filled, and I feel like when I look at the 7 total Diablo 2 characters, you have everyone with their little quirk and every little niche is kind of filled for every single playstyle. Although I guess you could argue, Amazon and Assassin, they kind of overlap at some point, and Druid overlaps everybody.
Well, obviously the Paladin and the Barbarian are kind of similar in a lot of ways too, with the tanking. But I mean, you just can't, you can't do. I mean, Diablo 1, maybe you can say they have really unique roles, but even then, you can play. A rogue could be pretty good as a mage or a combat character.
Yeah.
Anyway, location, as they say.
Location is everything.
Do you have a thought for Act 5? Do you want to go to Skovos? Do you want to see a jungle? What new area do you want to see?
I would love to not see a desert. I'm totally sick of deserts, and I'm kind of tired of Tristram. Like, I get it. I know, obviously, that's like where it all started, and I feel like that was where the D3 team was like trying to really hit us over the head immediately with the whole nostalgia thing. Yeah, it's like we went back to the barbarian areas, and I feel like Chaldeum was a lot like Gulain, except with more invisible footprints. Maybe, I don't know, Sansai is up there.
The wizard homeland.
Yeah, I mean, it would be really interesting to go to the locations of the characters and maybe try and understand more about the characters, going to Kurast and, understanding more about the Paladins and going to Ariat Summit in Diablo 3 or 2 was a great touch, because I could really get a better feel for the barbarians. For nostalgia's feel, it'd be kind of cool to go see where the Necros are and how they operate as a group, and, the Skovos Islands haven't been touched, and there's a lot of this map that has never been touched. I mean, have we ever really seen like Westmarch?
No, but it looks like the outdoor parts of Act 1, so we can skip that.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it would be interesting to get more backstory on Westmarch, since Tristram was like at war with them,
But I mean, in terms of that's the lore and stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, just in terms of level design, I mean, kind of the same thing I said about the monsters earlier. All the levels are kind of the same in Diablo. And in Diablo, I guess Diablo 2 as well, but there's small rooms, and then you go into a big outdoor area, and then there's like single file catacombs, and then you're in an outdoor area. I mean, I guess that's what else can you do? You don't want to have the same thing forever. But
true, yeah. Maybe Zanzai seems like a logical approach to all that.
I mean, I was thinking, like, one of the really cool things you get sometimes in play is you get a boss with the Waller modifier.
Mm-hmm.
And it really changes up the gameplay because not only are you trapped, inside their molten fire pit sometimes, but like you'll be far away and you can't get to them and they can't get to you.
Right.
And just having obstacles that come and go. I was thinking you could have a level where there's like moving platforms, like the staircases in Hogwarts or something. I don't know, but I mean obviously not literally that, but just something that where the gameplay level, like the arenas have a thing, where there's pits and then there's walls.
Yeah.
And you have to use the terrain. Like the terrain never really matters in Diablo 3 fighting monsters.
Right. Maybe re-exploring the Arcane Sanctuary, going back in.
You can shoot up or down stairs and stuff a little bit.
Yeah, seeing everything, how it's existed after 20 years, that's pretty fun. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Like, how to get the terrain to kind of work with you. I do know that in Diablo 2, the Jungles of Kurust was, like, the most dreaded thing ever. I hated it so bad until finally I started playing Sorceress, which was fine. I could just teleport to the other side of the river. Yeah,
but that's because it was big and spread out and took forever.
Yeah.
I mean, it could have been a desert or it could have been anything.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think a jungle could be fun just for the visuals. You just the level design was annoying of that in D2.
Yeah, they could definitely come back to the jungles. That would be pretty awesome.
Of course, the jungle was awesome. When I was playing a Boazon or a Javazon, because all those little huge hordes of fetish would run out, and you could just slaughter them all with like one multi-shot.
Right.
That was a really it depended on your build. If you're a paladin or a barbarian, it was horrible. It's like, oh god, the little shits won't stop running.
Yeah.
But how about a new follower? They're going to add a fourth follower. What do you want them to do?
Oh,
what would be different? I mean, more of a mage or something?
Well, they got the Enchantress. Yeah, Enchantress, Scoundrel, Templar. Huh.
They seem to have the bases pretty well covered there, it seems like to me.
They really do.
I have a suggestion.
Okay, I got nothing.
The Sparkle Panda.
The Sparkle Panda.
It's a panda, and it sparkles. And, of course, it's got glowing red eyes like Bobby.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't actually fight for you, though. It's not even a mount. In fact, it's like a Soviet Russia mount where it mounts you. And when it does this, it slows you down and lowers your movement speed. And when you're fighting, it doesn't actually help you. It just stands there and watches and makes snide comments.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Leiden does now. And it also collects gold for you, but it actually takes 25% off the top. So what do you think? Is that a feature we should have, or should that be like the bonus virtual pet if you buy the deluxe digital edition of Diablo 3 expansion?
I think that's definitely a big plus. I think if Bobby came in and said, "All right, guys, look, I've got this idea, and I'm the boss, so you have to make it." I'm pretty sure that...
obviously, the World of Warcraft tie-in there is a very strong one. They want to get World of Warcraft fans to play the game. So I think that's a winner all around, personally.
Exactly. They could have...
I'll look forward to seeing it.
The Sparkle Pandas, or Sparkle Ponies, and all that stuff. There's marketing potential there, I think they would say. It would also be... It would show just how absolutely soulless... It would be the end of Diablo 3. But... I say go for it. I think you should make the pitch.
Well, apparently Diablo 3 already ended for some people,
I know.
So that wouldn't really change much. So any other big changes you're looking forward to? Things you want? Obviously reigniting your interest?
Some sort of competitive game mechanic.
You mean like PvP?
Yes, that would be wonderful. Or even like an indirect PvP, like a Tetris-style monster killing. Like the more monsters you kill, the more the other guys have to kill. And, surviving... like some sort of survival mode. There's so many console games that have sort of done that, and it would be great to see a take on it for Diablo 3. I definitely am a big fan of gigantic, like literally just massive piles of enemies that are just getting mowed over. That was really the most satisfying thing for me in Diablo 2, was to fire off a ice orb right in the middle of a bunch of cows with halberds and watch them just all die. Just all of them just keel over at the same time.
So like a tower defense thing? I mean, that's obviously, that's a common... you had that, I don't know if you played that in BlizzCon. I think it was 09, I guess, was when they had Act 2 and the monk was in the demo. But there were a number of areas in the desert you could explore, and you'd like meet some guy, and he wanted to pull up he wanted to raise a chest up out of the desert, out of those the mining pits.
Yeah.
And you had to defend the area while thousands of Fallen came charging out at you.
Yeah, they had that in Act 1, where you have to.
Yeah, but it sucks.
Yeah, I know, and that's a bump.
They have it in Act 3 also. There's a part where there's in like the fire areas of the keep where this guy's like the armorer.
Yeah.
But then a bunch of skeletons just pop out and stand there. I mean, it doesn't change the gameplay at all. So
I feel like slow moving death, and you're trying to kind of whack-a-mole these things out of existence. That would be cool for me. Something that requires maybe a little bit of teamwork that isn't just dungeon.
We don't have that in Diablo.
That didn't have like the dungeon crawling, something stationary, something to protect. That's probably
so like competitive PvP where you're fighting for kill scores or time clearing of a dungeon, that kind of thing.
Yeah, something like that where people can, the whole point of playing online is that you can just take your victories and show them off like a jerk. So why not?
Well, that brings up the common suggestion, the bottomless dungeon. And I don't mean that like you get free refills or like it's something that you put black bars across to advertise on the internet, but a dungeon that has endless levels or endless lengths of it, and you're measured by how far you get down through it, or it gets harder constantly, or the bosses are respawning all around you or something.
I think we know that Bobby would put a stop to free refills. That's just freeloaders.
Yeah.
I do like the idea of you have like a group like in Warcraft people have arena teams, and that would be great if there was like a record for how far into a dungeon like a 4-man team got, and special perks for doing that, and stuff like that. That would be pretty fun. Some sense of a reason. I mean, it's one thing to get together with a group of my friends and go item hunting. It's another to like, okay, well, these guys just made it to this level of a dungeon, and we're going to try and break that record tonight. And we have to really coordinate and really focus. Like that. That would be great. I would love all those ideas. Blizzard just really needs to pick one and add it.
And we were, of course, all mentioning this in like 2010 and hoping it to be in the first game, but they had to reiterate the rune system for the 14th time, and then other things got in the way.
Yeah, and then they just started nixing things to make sure that everything was done on time.
And the whole matchmaking thing. I don't want to get into a whole other topic at this point, but being able to name your game, and I mean, people have complained about it. Xanth has talked about that pretty effectively. Is that people just make a game like the last quest in the act, and then you just go run through all of the act.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody actually makes the quest because they want to do the quest. They just make it because that's where they want to start off when they're doing their full-on item hunting.
Right.
And it was so much better to party up in Diablo 2. You could just name your game and say whatever Butcher Inferno or something, and everyone would join it and know they wanted to go kill the Butcher. And now you never know what it means, and you can't go between acts very well, and without losing your Nephilim Valor stacks, etc. So
yeah.
It's just funny how they spent so much time on Battle.net 2.0 or 2.5 or whatever the hell we're calling it by now, and somehow everything got worse in terms of multiplayer stuff in Diablo 2 and StarCraft 2.
Yeah, if I don't have friends on my friends list, I feel like it's impossible to meet new people. I guess that kind of sounds corny, but.
For when do you expect the expansion to be? That's the other. They said before 2014 was their hope, but that's a long time from now.
Yeah, Christmas 2013. I wish they'd be faster, but they won't. I have nothing positive to say about that, and I'm sure people will debate that heavily and have problems with what I'm saying, but the best way for me to appreciate this expansion is to just like the less I know about the release date, the better, because I'll just go crazy counting the minutes.
Yeah, they said 18 months for the StarCraft 2 expansions. That was back when we're just splitting it up into 3 parts, and of course it's 2.5 years. So
yeah, it's taken forever. So unfortunately, I think this is going to take them forever too. Although I'm looking at this list and what they're saying that it was going to be middle of 2013. Yeah, absolutely not. I would say,
but that was when the game was going to be out in 2011, so.
Yeah, I would say beginning of 2014, and you can obviously play this back when I'm wrong, and everyone can laugh at it.
I mean, it's amazing to think about the Diablo 2 expansion. That came out after a year. I mean, and it had, 2 new characters, a whole new act, totally redid all the item system, all these new features.
Yeah.
I mean, that was an amazing achievement to get it out in a year. I mean, we'd already be halfway there with Diablo 3.
Yeah.
Expansion was already halfway done, and like they had a release date already, saying next June expansion. You're like, what? I can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
And luckily, I won't have to, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and Diablo 3 didn't really end on a cliffhanger, so I don't know where. I remember when I beat Diablo 2. And maybe it's just because I was younger, but it just blew my mind. I'm like, oh my god, Baal is loose, and I gotta go get him. And oh my god, the expansion's coming out real soon, and I'm gonna be able to go, wrap this story up. I was still really invested, and I'm hoping, timing is also another important factor. And Blizzard never seems to get the timing right for anything, but we tend to forgive them when they release these, games that are incredible.
Yeah, or not.
Or lament over the fact that it wasn't the most perfect game of all time.
I wanted to mention this at the start, but I'll do it now at least. Xanth, our longtime hardcore columnist and frequent podcast guest, has wrapped up his column, unfortunately, sadly.
Yeah.
Fairly well. And he was hardcore, so I guess it only makes sense that he's gone away at some point.
Yeah.
But we have a new guy, ZappaFan, who's our hardcore columnist. Our hardcore forum moderator is going to be picking up where Xanth left off, talking about hardcore stuff in regular columns. So that's a nice little carryover.
Yeah.
And we'd still like to add additional columnists. If someone's listening to this and dying to write about like the Barbarian every week or something, that'd be great. Let me know. And I should have mentioned this at the start also, but given that we're, if you want to be on the podcast, now is a good time as well. I'm going to be posting a little, looking for new guests kind of thing. Obviously I can only find one guest for this show, and you don't even play the damn game anymore.
I know. If anyone's out there, I'm probably the worst possible guest, so.
I need to talk more about ongoing playing stuff with people who are actually playing it, and it would encourage me. I had a bunch of stories about recent games I've been playing, but without you to compare notes on, what's the point, right?
I know.
And I had all these complaints about the goddamn legendaries I can't find any useful ones, but, I'm sure I'm the only one with that problem. Everyone else finds really good ones all the time.
Yeah.
Oh wait. Okay, you've been listening to the Diablo podcast. We are online at DiabloIncGamers.com. Moo.
Moo. Moo. Moo.